Kicking off the top 10, we have my second favorite pseudo-legendary Pokemon, Metagross. For those of you who aren't aware, a pseudo-legendary is any Pokemon which has a 3-stage evolution line and a base stat total in its 3rd stage of exactly 600. They aren't actually legendary, but they are much more powerful than your average Pokemon. There's usually been one of these Pokemon per generation, except for Hoenn, which had 2. And while Salamence was good in its own right, give me Metagross any day. In case you weren't paying attention just a second ago, Metagross has a base stat total of 600. Its best stats are its attack and defense, but the rest of its stats aren't anything to sniff at either. It is a Steel Psychic type, giving it 8 resistances and an immunity to poison. Its ability Clear Body prevents stat reduction in most cases, so good luck trying to cripple this beast. As for moves, you've got a deadly assortment of techniques to work with. Meteor Mash, Hammer Arm, Zen Headbutt, Giga Impact, Iron Head, and even Explosion are at the disposal of this mechanized monstrosity. Plus, you can teach it Earthquake to take care of those pesky fire types. As for ground types, well, you're just gonna have to tough them out. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could teach it Ice Punch, but it's not worth taking up the extra space. Also, you've got Iron Defense if you decide that 130 base defense isn't good enough, and Rock Polish if you want to be Metal Sonic. Some of the best stuff about Metagross comes from its lore though. Metagross has intelligence superior to all known technology, can fly around with telekinesis, and is capable of forming craters in the earth. It's a quadrupedal supercomputer army tank. How can you not love it? The only thing I wish was different about Metagross is that you couldn't actually get him until after you beat the Elite Four back in Gen 3. As if to say, we have this great Pokemon, but you can't use it yet. Those evil, greedy geniuses.
Run! It's Godzilla!
Well, that didn't take long, did it? Yes, Tyranitar is my favorite pseudo-legendary, but only by a tiny bit. Pop quiz! What is Tyranitar's base stat total? If you said 600, pat yourself on the back because that means you've been paying attention. Or you're a massive nerd. Anyway, those stats are arranged mostly in its attack and defense stats, with its only mediocre stat being speed. It also has plenty of moves that make full use of that incredible power. Tyranitar can learn Thrash, Crunch, Earthquake, Stone Edge, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Flamethrower, Focus Blast, Outrage, Superior, and Giga Impact, among many others. This gives it a very diverse potential for movesets that can deal a lot of damage across the board of types. Pair that with its ability Sandstream, which gives it a special defense boost in a sandstorm, and also just so happens to start a sandstorm when it goes into battle, and you've got a weapon of mass destruction on your hands. Now I know what you're thinking. This guy sounds absolutely broken. Well, not quite. Nintendo and Game Freak had to give it something in order to prevent Tyranitar from being completely overpowered. Their solution was to give it a ton and a half of type weaknesses. With a typing of Rock and Dark, Tyranitar ends up having weaknesses to 6 rather commonplace types. As a result, despite how powerful it is, Tyranitar isn't a very good choice to bring out into battle. Sure, it can go in and wreck things rather effectively, but it also can take heavy damage from the other side, and a well-placed close combat or focus blast will practically annihilate it. Still, while it may not be the best Pokemon to send out of that Pokeball, I still like it quite a lot for more personal reasons. Its design is a stroke of genius, having this little 10-year-old boy send out a Titan into battle. And that scene from the Celebi movie pretty much makes him the most fearsome-looking Pokemon of all time. Metagross is better in battle, but Tyranitar is just a tad more likable in my opinion, and there's nothing wrong with that. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary bird of fire and the mascot of my channel since January 2012, Moltres! First off, let's start with the obvious. I've always been fascinated by mythology, and especially with mythological creatures. The Phoenix in particular has always captivated my imagination, and so this was an instant draw to Moltres for me. Sure, you could argue that Ho-Oh is the true Phoenix Pokemon, but Moltres has plumage made of fire. Ho-Oh just can't compete. So yes, the design and concept are very attractive, but how does Moltres fare in battle? Well, a base stat total of 580 is a good place to start. Its best stat is definitely its special attack, with its other stats being rather balanced. With a typing of fire and flying, Moltres has an immunity to ground and 5 resistances. It is weak to electric and water, and doubly weak to rock, but Solar Beam will take care of 2 of those problems pretty quickly. Speaking of which, Moltres has quite a few nasty moves in its arsenal. Solar Beam, Heat Wave, Sky Attack, Overheat, and Fly are just a few of its best moves. It can also learn Sunny Day, Roost, and Safeguard to make things that much tougher for the opponent. Plus, with its hidden ability Flame Body, it has a 30% chance of burning the opponent on contact, causing chip damage every turn and having the opponent's attack power. Moltres is also a great Pokemon to bring along for a Sun team thanks to Solar Beam and the added bonus to its Fire-type moves. You could even teach it Hurricane and bring it along on a Rain team to catch your opponent off guard. As with many legendary Pokemon though, the lore surrounding Moltres is what really takes the cake. For example, Moltres' Japanese name literally translates to fire. Also, according to Pokedex entries, Moltres doesn't migrate to find a warmer climate. Its migration is what causes the warmer climate. Lastly, it is known to heal itself by taking a dip inside an active volcano. Kids, don't try this at home. I may not like most bug types, but I'll tell you what I do like. Freaking Sun God bug type! Yeah, it's Volcarona, yet again. It seems like this guy's been popping up on everybody's list, and for good reason. First of all, just look at it. The image alone is striking. Then you look at it a little longer and you notice little details, like how the wings almost look like the petals of a tiger lily, or how its antennae almost look like a crown. It's just so alluring, like, dare I say, a moth to a flame?
Yes.
Anyway, after you catch that Volcarona, because it just looks so freaking cool, you realize, hey, there's more to this Pokemon than just a pretty face. It's a sweeper, no surprise there, with exceptional special stats and speed in exchange for rather average HP and physical stats. With access to Heat Wave, Bug Buzz, Flare Blitz, and U-Turn, feel free to go to town on your opponents. You also have Morning Sun and Roost for survivability, Rage Powder to help out your teammates in a double battle, and the ultimatum of sweeper setups, Quiver Dance. It can also have the ability Flame Body, which I just talked about with Moltres, or Swarm to help it go down fighting. It does have a ×4 weakness to rock, so stay on the lookout for that, but other than that, Volcarona is a brilliant design, attached to a brilliant concept, held together by a brilliant moveset. To sum up Volcarona in a word... BRILLIANT! Well, we've been stuck on the sweepers for a while now, so to switch it up a bit, let's look at Shuckle, who is pretty much the exact opposite. Much like Wobbuffet, Shuckle is much more than meets the eye. Of course, the first thing everyone knows about Shuckle is its defenses. With a base defense and special defense of 230, they're certainly in a league of their own. The rest of Shuckle's stats, however, are absolutely dreadful, with base 10 attack and special attack, and a base speed of just 5. You heard right, 5. Clearly, this is just a gimmick Pokemon with ridiculously high defenses, but absolutely nothing else going for it. Oh, you silly little slowpokes, how wrong you are. I'll admit, at first I had very similar opinions on Shuckle. Of course, that was when I was 8. But if you take a bit of time to really think about it and experiment a little, the practical applications for a good Shuckle are remarkably numerous. Obviously, you can use it as a wall. You can throw it out there and just soak up hits, while you heal up your teammates with items, or set up your team with moves like Safeguard. At the same time, you can cripple the opponent with moves like Gastro Acid to nullify abilities, Power Split to nearly halve the opponent's attack stat, as well as raise Shuckles, Knock Off to take care of a pesky item, and Encore to lock them into Limbo. And if you ever get close to the red, you can just use Rest and heal yourself right back up. But the options don't stop there. In a double or triple battle, you can use Guard Split on one of your teammates, easily turning a glass cannon into an unstoppable machine of death. You can make what I like to call a Kamikaze Shuckle, in which you use Power Trick to swap your Shuckle's defense and attack stats, giving it a base 230 attack stat, quickly followed by going, well, Kamikaze, with an attack like Earthquake or Stone Edge. Maybe not the most practical application, but incredibly fun when you get it right. I've even seen a few Shuckles that have swept entire teams thanks to a combination of Power Split, Defense Curl, and Rollout. It's an acquired taste as Pokemon goes, and it's far from conventional, but if you get to where you really know what you're doing, throwing out a good Shuckle is one of the most enjoyable experiences in Pokemon. It's Lugia, everybody! I'm sure a lot of you saw this one coming. If you saw my top 10 legendary Pokemon list back in 2012, you'll probably remember me saying that Lugia was my personal favorite legendary Pokemon, and that fact hasn't changed one bit. There are several factors which go into that statement, but I'll start with battling capability. A base stat total of 680 should prove effective enough. Its best stats, strangely enough, are its defenses, especially special defense, at base 154. This gives Lugia more survivability in exchange for slightly less raw power. That's not to say that Lugia is a weakling though. Oh no, it has quite a few tricks up its sleeve. For powerhouse moves, you've got Sky Attack, Extra Sensory, Future Sight, Hydro Pump, Surf, and its signature move Aeroblast, among others. You've also got Calm Mind, Recover, Safeguard, Rain Dance, Light Screen, Tailwind, and even some nasty ones like Wonder Room and Skill Swap. Lugia seems to have most major move types covered, so it's just a matter of building him how you want. Personally, I recommend Aeroblast, Extra Sensory, Tailwind, and Recover. True, Lugia does have 5 type weaknesses, and that can be a pretty big problem, but hey, at least it means you have a chance against it. Now let's move on to design. Most Pokemon have rather noticeable origins in their design. Whether based off of animals or mythological beasts, there's usually a somewhat clear connection. With Lugia, however, its design looks like nothing else I've ever seen. Oh sure, you could speculate that it's a combination of elements from various dragons, birds, sea creatures, etc., but that seems like pushing it. Lugia's design is original and creative, and I love that about it. It's such a sleek and eye-catching design for a Pokemon that didn't really have anything to branch off of. That is impressive. I also love the subtle references in its lore, like how a flap of its wings can create a 40-day storm, very reminiscent of the story of Noah, or how Lugia is said to lie in slumber at the bottom of the ocean, and that the Latin word lugeo means to lie dormant. Then we come to the Power of One, which is currently my favorite Pokemon movie, but that's a discussion for another day. This Lugia. This freaking Lugia. I don't know what they did or how they did it, but this Lugia is one of, if not the most awesome things to come out of the anime. The actions, the personality, the voice, the music, the build-up, it's honestly a spectacle to behold. A far cry from...
Not there! Wrong way! I want my love!
Like Wobbuffet and Shuckle, Ninetales is much more than meets the eye, but for a very different reason. Looking at it, you might think it's pretty cool, pretty cute, beautiful even. But underneath that silky visage lies a demon in waiting. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, battle capabilities. Ninetales is Fire type, no herpy-derp, with a base stat total of 505. Its best stats are Speed and Special Defense, though they're all pretty well balanced. Its move pool is also very well balanced. Solar Beam, Flamethrower, Dig, Extra Sensory, Flare Blitz, and Foul Play are there for damage dealing. Confuse Ray, Will-O-Wisp, and Hypnosis are there for status inflicting. Nasty Plot and Calm Mind are there for setting up, and Pain Split and Roleplay are there just to be a total nuisance. It's not the best in battle, but it's at least usable, and it can take on a few different roles rather effectively. But now, let's get to the lore, the information that takes Ninetales from being a cute little fox thingy into a regular act of witchcraft. Ever wonder why Ninetales actually has 9 tails? Well, according to some Pokédex entries, it's believed that 9 noble saints were united after death and reincarnated as this Pokémon. Each of the 9 tails, in turn, possesses a unique mystical power, all of which combined allow Ninetales to live for up to 1,000 years and make it intelligent enough to understand human speech. Now that's all fine and good, but then there's stuff like this. It is said to be able to control another's mind at will, and does so by reenacting Ben's nightmares. Okay, that's a bit creepy. If someone were to pull one of Ninetales' tails, they would have a curse inflicted on them for the next 1,000 years. I thought those were supposed to be saints in those tails, not demons. Just... what? But this sort of stuff only makes Pokemon like Ninetales more interesting as we take more notice of it. Heck, it was even enough to take number 4 on this list. Now how about that? As many of you know, hands down my favorite type is Poison. At first glance, Poison seems to be straightforward and easy to counter. I mean, just put a Steel type on your team and you're golden. But beneath the surface, there's so much that can be done with this type, and it's a shame many people don't take notice of it. And by far the best example of a Poison type that fits what Poison types do best is Scolipede. This Pokemon! This Pokemon has saved my behind on so many occasions, it's not even funny. If it weren't for the top 2, which are my favorites for more personal reasons, Scolipede would most likely be at the top of this list. Where do I even begin? First, look at the design. They managed to take a centipede of all things and turn it into one of the most swag-looking Pokemon out there. My favorite part is the expression. You'll think you're better than me? Heh, please. Now, with a base stat total of 475, Scolipede is sitting in an okay range. Good speed, good physical stats, and everything else is on the mass side. But that is made up for in spades by its move pool. Tons of my favorite attacks are represented here, and it all works together incredibly. Toxic Spikes, Protect, Double Edge, Agility, Sludge Bomb, Iron Defense, Endeavor, Earthquake, Megahorn. Never before had I seen a move pool with so many of my favorites, and I doubt I'll see another like it in the future. I can build a Scolipede in a different way every time, and have it still be a frontrunner in my team. No matter what situation I get into, no matter how far over my head I am, no matter what else happens, I can always count on my Scolipede to give a damn good performance in battle. And hey, I think that's a pretty good reason to put it at number 3. Let's take a moment to reminisce. I ask you, what was the first Pokemon you ever trained? Chances are you'd be able to tell me. Whether it was a Bulbasaur, a Cyndaquil, an Oshawott, or whatever else, people who play Pokemon tend to have very fond memories of that first adorable little creature they ever picked up and used, and I am no exception. Ladies and gentlemen, my first Pokemon, and my second favorite of all time, is... Oh, you know it. Back when I played Pokemon Emerald for the very first time, I picked Mudkip as my starter, and its evolved form Swampert is still to this day my second favorite Pokemon ever. I could ramble on about all my nostalgic memories with this Pokemon, and trust me I will, but I guess I'll start with the battle capabilities instead. Swampert has the highest base stat total out of all starter Pokemon so far, topping out at 535. All of its stats are well distributed except for speed, which is slightly mediocre. Its typing of water and ground gives it an immunity to electric types as well as 4 resistances. It only has 1 weakness, and unfortunately it's a pretty big one, a ×4 weakness to grass. But it's not that big a deal in the long run. Unless you're using a Sableye or a Spiritomb, you will have to worry about at least one type weakness regardless, and you can always teach Swampert Ice Beam or Sludge Wave to counter it. Speaking of which, Swampert has a very good move pool to work with. Earthquake, Hammer Arm, Muddy Water, Surf, Takedown, Outrage, and Hydro Cannon are just a few of the moves that it's ready on to unleash. And you also have Protect, Double Team, and Endeavor for those who want to be a bit more passive. But that's not really why Swampert makes it onto my list. It's for all the fond childhood memories I have of it. I remember it like it was, well, 10 years ago. Wow, that's so weird to put into perspective. Starting up that first playthrough of Emerald, seeing Mudkip and saying, "Ooh, I want that one." Then I named him Muddy. Hey, give me a break, I was 7. We ventured off on our journey. We faced some difficult trials, but we pressed through them all. Pretty soon, my little cute Mudkip grew up into a Marsh Stomp, and then a Swampert, which I renamed Poseidon. In fact, it was growing quicker than I knew what to do with. Pretty soon, it was taking out everything in our path left and right single-handedly. Gym Leader? Nop. Maxie? Nop. Random kid in the forest with a Beedrill? Nop. This got so crazy that by the time I reached the Elite Four, my Swampert was at level 92. 90 friggin' 2! Nothing could stop us. Not the Elite Four, not Wallace, not even the legendary Rayquaza could withstand our might. We had an unbreakable bond that could never be broken. Until I erased my save file and restarted with Trico. Biggest mistake ever. But anyway, Swampert is a really fantastic Pokemon that's great in battle and has a ton of nostalgic importance to me. Thanks for the memories, Swampert. I'll always cherish you. Oh yes! My favorite Pokemon of all time, bar none, is Absol. Why? Because it's freaking awesome, that's why. Its design, what can I say? It's amazing. The dark skin, the white fur, the eyes, the stance, the horn shaped like a crescent moon. What's not to love? Concept? Why not? Absol is known as the disaster Pokemon. It is able to sense and predict when natural disasters will occur. It attempts to warn humans and other Pokemon of the impending danger, but instead gets blamed for it. And yet he still comes back every time to do his duty. Now that's a very well thought out concept. Honorable, formidable, and even somewhat dark. Gameplay? It's the dark type at its absolute best. With base 130 attack, Absol has the highest attack stat out of all non-legendary Pokemon. And trust me, it uses that stat to the fullest. Sucker Punch, Night Slash, Psycho Cut, X-Scissor, and Strength are all at your disposal for dishing out barrel after barrel of physical damage. Your Swords Dance to increase that already imposing attack stat, Detect for being passive, and Perish Song to set your foes into a panic. It's pretty straightforward, but sometimes the simpler the better. If your opponent sends out an Absol into battle, consider at least one of your Pokemon finished, because Absol can throw around OHKOs like it's nobody's business. What it all adds up to is a Pokemon that takes all my favorite things about Pokemon and thrusts them all into one amazing creature. Everything from its design to its concept all the way down to its gameplay makes Absol my favorite Pokemon of all time. It's simply perfect. I know that's a bold statement to make, but for me, it is absolutely perfect. You couldn't possibly expect to make it any better. Holy shit!